Hello, and welcome to today's webinar with the staff from our Student Life Office and our Thrive Counseling Center. Today we're here with Chaplain Rob Music and Counselor Marty Green. So we're going to hear from those folks here in just a minute. But I want to tell you that we are glad you're here and we are happy that you are viewing this video as part of our GROWL orientation program. I'm Stephanie Stiltner. I'm the Director of Family Connections, but I'm a member of the GROWL Welcome Committee as well. So I'm going to turn it over to these guys, and we're going to just talk about those services in detail, and that's it. So we'll go ahead and get started. And Rob, if you don't care to start us out, to tell us a little bit about yourself and then services we provide here at UPike.
Well, I enjoy long walks on the beach. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. My name is Rob Music. I'm the campus chaplain, also an instructor in religion. I have been at UPike for almost 10 years, and the best things about me are my 4 kids, who I think are pretty awesome, and my really smart wife, who's a professor of religion here on campus. And my primary role is to journey with students when it comes to obviously like formal services. Let's say you go to Bible study or you go to convocation, things like that, to other such support of, I'm in this class, I'm thinking about science and I'm thinking about my religion and I don't know where all this works out. I do a lot of listening and maybe help you with some resources and tools, or even to maybe help you with some questions on putting all those pieces, at least for the moment, together in a way that makes sense and purpose for you.
Greetings. My name is Marty Green. I am the campus therapist. Kind of direct the Thrive Counseling Center. It's been on campus coming up on 2 years now. I can't believe that how quickly that time has gone. My role really is to kind of walk with folks on their journeys to continue to grow and to deal with some of the challenges of living. And that's really kind of what the Thrive Center is here for. It's a place where people continue to grow and work through some of the struggles that life throws at us. It's a service that's available to all students. There's no cost. It's confidential. Sometimes when we think of counseling or therapy, it gets a bad rep. It's just a place where people come to continue to prioritize their self-care. And that's really what we really focus on. And our role here is to really serve you and to be helpful to you in your journey, because it's challenging and there's transitions and there's all kinds of curveballs that life kind of throws at us. We're living it right now in all kinds of ways. So it's a space where folks talk about what they need to talk about to keep moving forward and growing. And that's really kind of the bottom line of what the Thrive Center is all about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you have someone that helps you at the Thrive Center. Do you care to introduce Cecil as well and kind of talk about his role within the division?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Cecil Williams is also a clinician on campus. He specializes in the ACE program, where he is a counselor works in that department, but he also works collaboratively with me and provides various kinds of service that the campus might need that can be helpful. So right now we have 2 clinicians and we are getting ready to get 1 more. So we are able to kind of broaden our services that we want to offer to assist folks in their areas to continue the growth.
Right, thank you. And you mentioned the time being times of uncertainty and times of transition. So generally speaking, coming to college, especially first-year students and their families, I know, Marty, in the past, you and I have talked about just transition being one of the most, how did you say it, being one of the most troublesome times that maybe people may experience in their life. So, and it's a big deal. I like to say to families jokingly that it's a big flipping deal when a student goes to college. It's a big flipping deal to everybody in the family, even the dog grieves when students move out. So, and it's okay to experience those things. And so talk about that, just that general transition, outside the pandemic world, that is still a big deal.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Of the 100 most stressful things that we experience as human beings, transitions in the top 5. So they are a really big thing. And one of the reasons that they are such a big thing is it's one of those things where we adapt to changes, moving outside of our comfort zone, leaving things that are familiar, kind of walking into environments that we really don't know how things are going to play out. There's lots of uncertainty. So there's a lot going on. transitions also are the things that push us to grow the most as well. And so there's some real benefits, but along with some challenges. One of the biggest things that I always want folks to remember is that transitions take time. Even if things work ideally, and very few things work ideally, but even if it did, it takes at least 6 months to kind of navigate a new transition. On average, it takes about a year. And the way we do that, first and foremost, is prioritizing our self-care and developing really proactive patterns, connecting with kinds of activities that help us continue to grow and have purpose, where we're doing things that kind of elevate our ability to continue to push ourselves to grow as well. So, kind of how we choose to intentionally put our time together, spaces where we put our energy into, and prioritizing our self-care, we do really, really well in transitions. But those things are absolutely necessary versus waiting for something to happen to get better. We have to initiate things so that things will be, more satisfying or will be improving. If we wait for self-care to happen, we wait. Or if we wait for the world to give us permission to take care of ourselves, we wait. We need to initiate it. I think one of the things that we really do well and try to do well here at UPike is we want to walk with folks to prioritize their self-care. Because when you are feeling good about you, I benefit from that, right? Because when you feel good about you, you interact with your peers in a more satisfying way. You're more productive in a classroom or an employment setting. You're more likely to be involved in things that are even, very helpful to a community. So there's just benefit on top of benefit. But if you don't feel good about you, then it's real easy for everything to be negative, right? And so transitions are exciting adventures. They're sort of like a challenging hike where the topography can be sometimes steep hills and the footing might sometimes be challenging. But we want to remind ourselves that we're completely capable of being able to do the hike. And there's people there that are kind of the walking sticks to guide you along the way so you don't feel like you're by yourself.
Exactly. Now this is going to be true confessions for me. When you said, I'm sure I'm not alone. When people view this, they'll probably agree. When you said transition, to kind of navigate that transition takes 6 months, if not a year. I'm like, oh, that's a long time. That's a long time. And in the world of instant gratification, especially transitioning to campus, the new, it takes a while to wear off. Especially the new bedding, the new sheet. There's still that new everything smell in the dorm room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But still, and then they have the new people and experiences, so it takes that new a little bit to wear off. But what kind of transitions do you see in that first semester? Because every semester of college feels different, right? The first semester,
yeah,
in the spring semester, and then when you return your second year, college is full of transitions. As soon as you get used to something, flip, it changes. So what kind of transitions can students and families expect kind of that first semester?
Well, one of the first ones is having to navigate your own schedule, right? I mean, as far as being responsible to initiate your own patterns, where they're not going to be established for you or someone's not going to be doing it for you. You get to do it for yourself, right? And that can be a double-edged sword as well. I have some freedom to do it, but also there's a sense of responsibility as you'll decide to get yourself up to get to class. You'll decide what environments you spend your time in, who you choose to interact with. That's a big one, right? Getting used to being away from what was familiar is one of the biggest challenges. Oftentimes we talk about homesickness. We're wired to stay with the familiar, as human beings. And so when we leave the familiar, there's this little grieving process where it's uncomfortable, or it's uncertain, or it's scary. And that could be more intense for an individual based on that particular individual, but it's very, very real. And so kind of learning a new schedule, acclimating to a new environment, new faces, new people. There's lots of layers that are going on. What I remind folks, though, is within that, there's great adventure, right? There's great opportunity. And we kind of identify little victories. For a lot of our students coming in, I'm a huge proponent is, if you get your sleep cycle in order on your own, that's a huge victory. When you're going to bed and getting up at the same time, that's a huge victory. Because when you sleep well, everything works well. When you don't sleep well, nothing works well. And it's real easy when we get on campus to say, oh, I can stay up till 3:30 in the morning and sleep till 1 because I don't have class until 2. Yeah, but physiologically, that's not really good for your brain. That's not helpful. That's not healthy. Actually, that can cause more problems, right? And so learning how to do the things that are healthy is really empowering. And, self-care is self-empowerment, which means it's self-love. And when we do that kind of stuff, and then we just continue to benefit from it, that's very empowering, right? And so transitions offer us an opportunity to do a really, really intensive growth in a short period of time. It has lots of adventures. I always invite folks to identify the little victories. I get up, I do the things I'm supposed to do that day, and I chose to do it on my own. That's a little victory, right? I'm interacting with people that I know that are healthy for me rather than toxic and traumatic. That's a little victory, right? I'm choosing to do something that there's an accountability I'm responsible for, like getting my homework done or doing something that's beneficial to the community, doing a volunteer experience, doing something that helps me grow as a person. That's a little victory. Each day when we're identifying these little victories, that's very empowering. And it helps us navigate our transition so that they become satisfying rather than stressful. Because our transitions can be very satisfying. It just depends where we choose to put our time and energy.
That's awesome. And I love that you mentioned those little victories, and being able to identify your own little victories is a major milestone, I imagine, because sometimes we're able to see other people's victories easier than our own. So, because but there's people on campus that encourage lots of departments on campus. We can go up and down departments and floors and divisions that will encourage and give them the pats on the back and remind them, hey, that was a good job, and that was a big deal. That was a big deal. You did study for that test and have made this grade, or you reached your goal for whatever that is. So there are those people to kind of help you celebrate as well. You touched on something that I want to toss it over to Rob now about lots of adventures and opportunities. That wild and crazy guy, Rob, right there, Chaplain. So talk about some spiritual life, and we'll get into different worship opportunities and some things like that on campus. But what about the service component? I know that's a big component of spiritual life as far as service to our campus and service to our communities and service to others in general. So will you talk about some of those that we've had, service opportunities that students and even first-year students have participated in over the past 10 years, and then maybe some plans and ideas we have going forward?
Yeah, so I want to follow up with something you were talking about earlier about the kind of transitions. I think one of the interesting transitions is our immersion into diversity that so many of our students talk about, whether it's because you talked about the familiar and when campus looks different than what we're used to. Right now, that may be a racial difference. Like maybe I come from a historically black high school or kind of an all-white high school, and I start seeing diversity like that. But a lot of times, it's diversity of like family patterns, diversity of kind of things that are okay to say and not to say, and we get immersed into that, and it really almost feels like system overload. And then we start thinking about a sense of threat, like this is my boundary. This is who I am. I'm not that. So I really want to encourage students to think about, and to me, this is my theme of 2020, is as opposed to sensing threat with difference, to really see it as an opportunity to really lean in and say, here's something I can learn, right? I can really expand and grow. Kind of what Marty had talked about with these transitions is really an opportunity to thrive and expand and develop. And because of that, service is a way that we really can immerse ourselves in the different. What I mean by it is, let's say here I am fully able-bodied, young-ish kind of, and maybe I go to a nursing facility and I pull some weeds. And that day I encounter a person who now is maybe wheelchair bound or is struggling with memory loss. That's a difference, right? That's a diversity for me that I am being invited to engage, to appreciate, and to include in my own world. So what we hope for in service isn't simply a cool photo op that I can change my Facebook profile and be like, look, I'm helping the poor. It really is to think about holistically, not only am I doing good, but I'm developing good inside of me. So when students come to campus, now I say all this in a today July 20, whatever it is, COVID world, that we're going to be inviting first-year students to be a part of very small groups of campus service throughout the first semester that they'll be here. So on some Saturday or Friday in relationship to their schedule, we might go to that nursing home, or we may go to, some place on campus, or maybe a place that does food for the hungry, and we'll invite people to serve. This will be organized with a faculty or staff member, and so it's not like you have to plan it on your own, like, oh no, right? It's just, you'll be assigned some things, and that day you'll probably meet some students who may be a little different from you. Maybe you have them in class or they're on your team, and you'll do some service. That's really what we call introduction to becoming a bear. And then from there, we have some opportunities for service that branches out. I can talk about that now, Steph, or I can hold my peace, and it's up to you.
Let's go ahead and talk about, let's go back and dig into that in case someone can't watch the full thing through. Let's kind of hit some high points at the beginning. So back on the spiritual life side, I know diversity. We have lots of different worship opportunities on campus, and then within basically walking distance or a short drive from campus. So can you talk about what we currently are planning to provide on campus for worship services and clubs, and then maybe some just various experiences that you've taken or the religious faculty have taken students to experience?
Yeah, okay. So anyways, we have, when it comes to campus, this semester, probably what it's going to look like face-to-face is we'll have an opportunity for small group Bible study, maybe socially distanced yoga. We want to try to provide that. Meditation will be offered for students, an opportunity to center and meditate. There will be Mass. Roman Catholic Mass will be on campus for students to receive the Eucharist. And we're not sure about kind of a larger kind of quote unquote worship service, but we do have churches within walking distance that are still meeting in person and to support that. So those are kind of the variety of types of worship experiences or religious activities. Now, you'll also be invited to participate in what we call Convocation. Convocation is a weekly experience where we have a speaker, and they will help us see compassion, empathy, justice, in maybe some very diverse ways. And so every week, about a 45-minute experience where you will hear from somebody who may not be like you, or talking about an experience that may not be yours. And that we find that Convocation is a really good way as an intro for diversity into your own spiritual journey, however you're piecing that together. But now trips, when it comes to trips, we always take students to a temple inside the tradition of Hinduism. We take students to a mosque inside the Islamic tradition, some various different churches we take students to. And then on our service trips, let's say we go to Chicago or Philadelphia or Detroit or Atlanta or maybe even Haiti, on those trips you absolutely will have some new difference or diversity with worship opportunities, because of course you're going into metropolitan cities that have 8 million people, right?
So the Convocation series is interesting. I know it's optional. Students, it's weekly, and I've attended a few myself that they're always you always take something out of it. So talk about a few of the different speakers. It's not all directly religious related per se, but they're service related. I know you've had alums and different people from different walks of life. So kind of explain on kind of what types of speakers students will possibly hear from.
Yeah. So last year, for example, we had a person who had made a transition into their own sense of who they are. So they talked about transgender identity and that personal journey, what that looked like for them to be in Eastern Kentucky and to make that transition. So that was a great time for students to hear a personal journey, to ask some questions to a person who said, hey, you know what, you can pretty much ask me anything. We had a gentleman who started an organization that supports communities who help the poorest of the poor around the world. And we talked to an alum who I guess I wouldn't say almost an alum, who really couldn't find himself while he was here, almost a 6-year journey, but then somehow got connected with a summer camp job that led him into the Salvation Army, where he's now a minister or a servant in that group, and he's taking care of people who are homeless in Cincinnati, Ohio. So a wide variety of types of speakers. Now, some of those classes or some of those convocation moments maybe tie with your class. So, for example, there's a lawyer coming and history and criminal justice say, oh, by the way, extra credit, which will become code word for I love you, that's my best friend. When you hear that, you flock to those moments. And what we really invite for students is to say, when we put out the service list of convocations, pick out a couple, challenge yourself when you're prioritizing your time to say, I feel like I would be interested or I could really grow from that. Put out a couple, challenge yourself to go and experience it. This year, all of our speakers will be on Zoom, so students can engage it virtually.
Good. And I think some of those convocations are incorporated into the first year seminar course. So they're encouraged throughout first year seminar courses to kind of have that, they're encouraged / nudged to kind of experience at least 1 or 2 of those a semester. So I think those are always good. I know we've covered a lot of things. So I still have more on my list. You guys know this about me that we could talk all day. But what are some things that you would like to share, specifically if the audience is first year incoming family and their students?
I think from a wellness perspective is one of the main reasons people might experience kind of various types of symptoms like sleeplessness or anxiousness, or their mood might be low. In most cases, it's stress, right? And too much stress, or what might be fueling that. Well, the good news is we can do an awful lot about that to make that better. Our ability as human beings to be resilient and to kind of reduce our stress in our lives, there are some really wonderful things that we can do. One of the most important things, though, is that we want to be able to talk about it, right? One of the things that can be with me, that can be with Rob, that can be with Stephanie, it can be with people that you have connection with, right? Because we either talk it out or it leaks out, but it always comes out, right? Most of the time, too many of us wait till it starts leaking out. And that's when we start noticing sleep and anxiousness, all these things that, they say, well, I got all these bad things are happening to me, or there's something wrong with me. No, it's your brain and body is just saying, we need some attention. There's a lot of things happening that's kind of affecting how effective that we want to be or we're able to be. And we're letting you know. So, our culture really villainizes and uses scary language around, oh, someone is depressed or they're anxious. That's just the brain and body's way of saying something needs attention. And literally, in over 95 to 99% of the time, it's something that we can do on our own, as long as we're able to kind of talk about it and identify what we need. Right? And so my hope always is that people have those support systems wherever they may be. They'll be built in on campus, but wherever they might be, if that's a pastor back home or a connection to a member, there's lots of things that could be those support things. But we want to be able to talk about it, because otherwise it's going to leak out, and we want to avoid that.
Absolutely. And one thing I did want to mention, Marty, is there are 2 questions. If families are sitting here wondering, or students, as they review the video, I have my best friend, and I'm nervous. I know I need to talk to counselor, and I know I have an awareness that I know I need something. I'm being referred to you, so can I bring my best friend with me, who's also a student? Can me and my roommate come to you together that first time? Or is it,
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable at least bringing somebody with me. Can I do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, as long as whoever is coming is comfortable with that. People do that frequently. That's not a problem whatsoever. And very often, sometimes folks just need to have kind of that safe person as they're kind of walking into that new environment. And that's absolutely appropriate. And I'm completely comfortable as long as they are.
Absolutely. And one other question, I see our provost has joined us. I'm going to talk to her in just a second. But families sometimes, I'm director of family connections, and I talk with families daily. which is awesome. But I tell families that they wonder like when to contact campus. Well, I just basically tell them that, you know, when your gut tells you to, you can reach out to campus and let us know if you feel like something's just not quite right with your students, something, because we know higher education, you know, counseling, you know, spiritual life, you know, higher education and administration. We know our history professors know history. We know those areas, but our families know our students.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key. So we have to work together to make those matches, right? And so our students to be successful. So you get sometimes maybe from family or somebody off campus that may kind of give you a heads up and say, my student's kind of a welfare check, kind of, Rob and Marty, I guess. Can we just kind of do that? How if I call and say, my student's kind of been off. I'm just not, nothing's really wrong, but I just want somebody to check on him.
I mean, certainly that happens, and then we kind of decide what is kind of the best way to reach out to that student and who might be the best person to do that, right? I mean, kind of, because oftentimes if someone doesn't know me really well or at all, and I come running into their space and saying, hey, checking on you, is everything okay? What's the relationship with me? And that actually might be more anxiety producing, right? It might actually cause more distress. And so, yes, we're going to follow up with making a connection, but we want to be really thoughtful of what's the safest and the most comfortable way to do that, and then kind of figure out what support would make most sense and have that person kind of be a part of that process to the greatest degree possible.
Yeah, and I think too, for students who are listening, maybe a little different than maybe high school or in a small town experience where, let's say, mom or dad is really involved in your life and dad just makes a text to a teacher or whatever and gets all your information. College is very different than that. We hold students' privacy and confidentiality to the utmost. So always, particularly when someone's trying to find out information, our gut's always going to be kind of like, yeah, that's probably no, until we talk to some students, until we talk to the student. But when it comes to a general, like, I am concerned for my son or daughter or my grandson, part of that could be you're concerned for your son or daughter or grandson, but you also actually maybe be concerned for you because transitions are really hard, and we encourage you to reach out. I feel like in a world of where, I mean, when I was growing up, it may cost you some money to make a long distance call, or, you know, we don't live in that world anymore. Text and email are free. And if you need to do that, do it. We honor that idea, that concern that you have, and to help you and support you on that journey also.
Absolutely. And we'll come back to that in just a second about how our students, you know, the role of our care team, that we kind of make sure the care team is, you know, a dedicated group of individuals from various departments, but then they also, the care team branches out to find maybe that student's person that they've connected with, the faculty or staff or advisor. So it's that network that we know most students find their person on campus, and we'll talk about that importance there. But Dr. Worth, do you have anything you want to say to our future viewers of students and families?
I just wanted to say hello and just greet everybody. They will, and you all will get to meet many of our service faculty and staff on campus. There are opportunities to get connected. There are opportunities for support and connections on our campus. And I wanted to say hello to everybody. Welcome to University of Pikeville and a very important service area that we have on our campus. Thank you to Marty and Rob for what they do and the connections that they make on campus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're talking about it's different than high school and college. Absolutely, in your relationships, 100%. And we say we connect in ways. It's not an intrusive way. It's not a big brother way that at all. I work with families every day, but I don't have access to any personal student information, grades, anything. It's just that I'm just their advocate in general. Okay, so I point them to resources on campus. So when students say they found their person, that's important, and we can talk about that from a spiritual and well-being standpoint. But when I say your person is, your faculty in college, that's who is going to write you a letter of recommendation later. That's the person you're going to befriend on LinkedIn and say, hey, I got this job promotion. They're the ones you're going to send your wedding photos to and that sort of thing. So talk about, and it may be someone from a different walk of life and, 2 generations older than you, but they just connected when you talk about your person. So talk about some of those relationships that maybe you've seen or been a part of yourself and what that means. I'm going to mute.
Yeah, I'll start. 2 weekends ago, I had a great privilege of doing a wedding for a former student of mine who came in as a soccer player, didn't really have him in class. Then I did have him in the class. And I'll just say he didn't break any UPike records for being a student in my class. But we hit it off and traveled together and, helped him move, did his wedding. And, it was one of those first phone calls he made when he was going to ask his wife to marry him. Those are the kind of connections you make. Now, I would like to believe that happens all the time, but it doesn't. We have our different individual connections. But for me, when we look at a world where we're open and expanding, realizing that the place that we're coming to really wants us to succeed and to thrive, we can begin then open to different people and realize, like, you know what, you might not check all my boxes, but we might later become best friends. You might be the person in my life who shares something with me, or you're at that moment, such a tender moment of life-changing experience. I have been thinking a lot, Steph, about the idea of, and maybe it's because I just had a baby, right? But that birth analogy, I mean, it's horrendous in some ways, right? It's like, aha. But, with that, for the baby, it seems so horrendously traumatic, leaving such a wonderful place of comfort, right? Everything I've ever known is that. But if the baby was cognitively aware enough to realize, like, I'm going into better hands than I was before. I'm going into a professional doctor, and then I'm going to go into mom's arms, and there's really no safer place on earth than that. I think birthing is a pretty good analogy for the college experience. We're leaving really comfortable experiences, but now we're going into something that may even be more rich and greater, because we didn't even know that we needed that friendship, that connection, that mentorship, that companionship, until we get it and we go, yeah, like, this feels right, maybe for the first time. So I just encourage students to see that it doesn't have to be a faculty member. It literally could be the person who's cleaning your building, but to be open, because all of us who work here are committed to your best and to your good.
I loved your analogy. That was really, really awesome. There's, in thriving, there's these 6 paradigms that people who thrive, they do these 6 things, right? How they choose to live their lives. And one of the things is dwelling shaping, meaning is people, places, and things, where you put yourself and who you put yourself with will often determine how much you grow or how paralyzed you are, right? And we never know what that might look like if we never leave the room, right? So the opportunities that will be here, and now of course it's going to be different with COVID to a degree, but there's still going to be opportunities where you can interact with folks who are very interested in trying to improve their little corner of the world, right? There are so many folks who are very interested in continue to grow and develop themselves, right? Or be a part of that. Faculty, staff, people on campus that are involved in really, really good things that are good for them, but also good for the community or for the world at large. Or we can put ourselves in places where people are not participating in things that are all that healthy, or are doing things that are self-destructive or dramatic or toxic. And the great thing about the brain is it'll go wherever you feed it, right? If you feed it negative, it'll live negative. If you feed it positive, it will grow positive. It's not super complicated, but where we put ourselves in the activities and the people, places, and things, if you will, that push us to grow, that are involved in fulfilling meaningful kinds of things, more and more doors open. When we move in things that are negative, we live in a 6x6 cell. And that's consistent. And the wonderful thing on this campus is there's a lot of those things that will be door opening, but the reality is too, there'll be a lot of those things that are going to be basically imprisoning. And we want to avoid the things that lock us up, and we want to put our energies in the things that open it up. And that's kind of what the hope is: dwelling, shaping.
And Rob, you mentioned something that's awesome. But Rob, you mentioned something I wanted to add to when you talked about, you know, you find different people. You know, hey, I didn't know I needed a friend like this. And I grew up small town, born here, raised here, stayed here, love it. My daughter goes to the same elementary school that I went to high school in, love it. Graduated with, you know, around 70 of my closest friends that I knew mainly from kindergarten on. So you don't know. I mean, when you say you grow up with people, you grow up with people. And that's just who you've known always. So you don't have a lot of diversity in thought or experiences. You may have some experiences in social class. Some, you know, maybe even though you're from the same, you know, 20-mile radius or whatever that is, there's some diversity in some ways, but really in the big scheme of the world, not so much, right? So that's what we say when we come to college and we find our people. We didn't even realize sometimes we needed those people. And so,
well, I think if I can add to that, and I think sometimes we actually find ourselves for the first time, because I think about my own journey, right? You know, you kind of get locked into a certain pattern. There's family patterns, there's community patterns, there's particular expectations, right? And then when you come to college and maybe it's a class, a book, an encounter, we start seeing things differently. And that always has an impact on how we even see ourselves. And for some students, they may become honest about things that they, you know, didn't even have language to put to. And when that happens, we can make it all sunshine and roses and like, oh, you'll find out who you are and it'll be nothing but unicorns and rainbows and Skittles. Sometimes that's horrifically upending to your life. And that's, we call a transition. And in that case, this is a perfect moment where you encounter the Thrive Center. Maybe you come to my office and you go, things are happening and I want this to be an area of growth, but I don't know how to get there. And that's a perfect moment for the Thrive Center to partner with you. We're not talking about a long-term marriage. I'm not going to go to the counseling center for the rest of my life, but like, this is a transition. I need a little support because I'm starting to learn about me in a very different way.
Yeah, and things you find out is like, I didn't know this. You know, I didn't know everybody didn't do X, Y, and Z, or everybody didn't experience this, and this, and you know, this wasn't normal, or this was normal, or accepted. You know, and some of those are funny. You know, we talk about the way we pronounce things here in Central Appalachia and things like that, but some of them are, like you said, could be horrific. You know, so talk about. I don't want to go too deep in things, but a lot of healing sometimes takes place when you change your environment through transition, right? It can. And healing, I know that's a huge topic to bring up, but healing's hard and it's messy. So how do you kind of identify a student maybe when you're talking to them that they want to heal, or they encourage, you know, they're kind of on the cusp of that kind of that realization? How does that kind of play out?
Well, I mean, certainly from a wellness perspective, there's kind of an imagery that I think covers it all really, really well. If you've ever seen an infant learning to walk, right? And I mean, this really kind of speaks to transitions and growing and dealing with healing, unhooking from, you know, toxic views of self. But when you see an infant learning to walk, initially, there isn't anything pretty about it. It's clunky. Sometimes it's painful to watch. Sometimes there might be, you know, loved ones want to say, well, I just am going to hold them so they don't fall down, which means that then they never learn how to walk, right? But what do we know about that infant is they persist. They keep getting up. In this short period of time when they were first starting to barely take a step and it looked really, really kind of ugly, in a short period of time, they're running, striding all over the place. That's how we learn. Every time we start something new, that's how we learn, like that infant learning to walk. It always starts clunky and less than graceful. In very short periods of time, we're striding. That's how we heal. It always starts painful and uncomfortable and not very steady. And in a short period of time, we're running. For loved ones, if they don't allow that little one to persist, that little one is basically crippled by that enabling. And then they grow, right? And so parents and support folks, your child or the student that comes here, there's going to be times where they're going to struggle. And that's when they're going to learn the most. There's going to be times where it isn't going to be easy or it's going to be wobbly. But like you watch them learn to walk, they're going to do the exact same thing here, as long as we believe and give them the guidance sometimes that you can do this. You can keep doing it. We'll walk with you, but you're going to be the ones that have to do the walking. And so, but healing works the same way, that it is uncomfortable initially, but before you know it, it opens up to a skill set that we never imagined could happen in a short period of time, and we're at a completely different place. So that metaphor, that example of learning how to walk really speaks to transitions and growth and healing from pain in our lives, getting unstuck from the terrifying and moving through major losses in our lives. It's really the same process. The wonderful thing is we're completely capable of doing it. Mm-hmm. Wired to be able to do it. It's already there.
Awesome. Awesome. So I know we're getting ready to come up on our time. What's one piece of advice, your best piece of advice that you would give an incoming student?
I would say be hungry. Be hungry. I was thinking recently about students who maybe have no idea why they're in college or, why they're taking certain classes. But the simple desire to want something different or want to better yourself and be as hungry as possible for that. You don't have to have all the answers, because quite frankly, a lot of times those answers change, right? But just be passionate and go after it. So to me, I feel like that is like the perfect formula or thing that we need to really make your college experience as life-giving as possible. I mean, just gobble up as many different experiences and relationships and people and books as possible, and it's going to be really worth it.
Every student that's coming in is already wired to be their optimized self. They don't have to do anything to create something that isn't already there. My best encouragement and advice is prioritize your self-care, be open, and lean in and give it a go.
And before we close, Steph, can I ask Marty a question? You've used great language today about self-care, Marty. What happens if I come from a family or a tradition that, buddy, that sounds selfish, and I'm just told I can't be selfish. God doesn't want me to do that. Sure. Could you help me clarify self-care and being selfish?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. But I mean, and oftentimes, if folks, especially if there's kind of a spiritual background that folks have some strong connections, I remind folks that Jesus took major breaks multiple times, big, long breaks, right? And certainly in kind of scriptural language, the length of time meant a long time. Mm-hmm. That's some pretty good modeling that said that you got to take care of yourself so you go back and do the work, right? And you can take a look at some other disciplines. There's these self-care breaks that are built in always. in order for folks to continue to be able to do what they need to do. Selfishness is, doing something regardless of how it impacts somebody else, right? For my own needs. Self-care is replenish my needs so I can continue to do things that I want to do for people. Those are the two differences. Self-care is not selfishness, because if we don't take care of ourselves, our brain and bodies will shut us down. So it's already built in that we either give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves so we can keep doing what we want to do, or if we don't, the brain and body starts stopping us from being able to do the things that we want to do. It'll start shutting it down anyway. And so self-care is not selfish. It is a way for us to continue to do the things that we find valuable.
That's so helpful. Thank you.
Yes, and that's perfect. Thank you, Rob, for bringing us back to that point. That's absolutely something we hear all the time.
Yeah.
And we don't understand that, and there's some guilt associated with it sometimes too, as we try to do that. Some of us are better at it than others, so absolutely. I'll go ahead and wrap that up, but thank you both for taking the time to join us today. And I'll remind everyone that your contact information is on our website, and I know, Rob, you're on social media. If you want to go ahead and shout out your social media handles, if they want to reach out to you there, do you remember those?
Oh, yes, please. At UPike Chaplain. Follow me on Twitter.
Well, see, that's always a good way to reach you, right? So, and we do have that information, like I said, on our website. So thank you again for joining us, and that'll be it. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye, all.